Bonjour, everybody! Kirk Spano back from Paris and the south of France. This isn't really a hat from there, but it's the only one I had. I didn't buy one. This is from New Orleans, a nice little shop somewhere in the French Quarter. All right, so big trip to Paris. I worked like 10 hours over 3 weeks. I read the news a little bit. Actually, not that much. I tried to talk to as many people as I could about what they thought about America, what they thought about Americans, what they thought about France, what they thought about the economy. Had as many conversations as I could based on being a tourist. And, not everybody really wants to talk to you about that stuff. I did have a couple of people from family offices show up. I had invited them. They didn't tell me they were coming until a couple days ahead of time. I said, hey, I'm going to be in Paris. Like, okay, I guess we'll get together for coffee. I actually did one dinner. And I talked to some people who had a couple bucks. Probably the three people that I talked to combined net worth is somewhere in the range of $200 to $300 million. Hard to always tell based on private asset valuations. However, I think that we should talk about what's going to happen now post Iran conflict. I think that energy is going to be a big story for several years now. I had predicted that at some point this conflict would occur. It took much longer than I thought. I thought this was going to happen during the first Trump administration. I had my reasons. We've gone through them umpteen times. Basically, the Trump administration is very beholden to the Saudi Arabian government. Saudi Arabians buy Trump coin and they pay Jared Kushner in mysterious ways for different deals. They were able to get NVIDIA technology a year ago, or a little less than a year ago. That relationship between the Trump administration and the Saudi Arabian ruling family is pretty apparent for anybody who wants to take a look at it and think about, how these decisions and relationships are evolving. So there's also the relationship with Israel that I think that we've lost a bit of control of. And there is a pretty good chance that the outcomes from the Iran war impact the price of oil and natural gas for 3, 4, 5 years. The amount of infrastructure that has been destroyed so far, they're saying about $25 billion to repair it. And it's going to take 3, 4, 5 years. And we don't know if that's the end, right? We don't know if that's the end. There might be more. If the United States destroys Karg Island, which is where Iran does about 80% of their shipping from for oil and gas, then, who knows? That could be another million barrels of oil taken off the global market for a very long time. And the natural gas, although that's mainly pipeline to China, there is natural gas there too. So the impact of what's going on in Iran with the market cheerleading every time somebody says, oh, there's going to be a ceasefire, that doesn't undo $25 billion worth of damage to oil and gas facilities throughout the Middle East. Ultimately, I think that there is a resumption of hostilities. I think that there is a Karg Island mission at some point. I think that it is used to try to put pressure on the Iranian regime, which, again, there's a lot of rhetoric and emotion and ideology involved here. But back after 9/11, we should have gone after the Iranian regime back in the early 2000s. They are the ones who fronted the money and the training for the disaffected Saudis who carried out the bombings. We have now seen over 20 more years of the Iranians supporting the Iranian regime, not the people. The people are probably split 2-1 against the regime. And that number might be shrinking because, the regime keeps killing people. But, I thought we should have attacked Iran 20 plus years ago. And so I don't, that I'm not a President Trump apologist, right? I've been calling him out as a thief and a crook and a long con type of guy for a decade, almost a decade now, right? And I think that these attacks were probably ill-timed, not well planned. But I think in hindsight, it always made sense that he do it during his second term. So had he won the presidency in 2020, I think the attack would have already happened. So this is a delayed response because the Biden administration in between, and the idea that the nuclear deal was really preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, that was always baloney, and I'm a pro, generally blue voter. I liked President Obama. I thought he missed several big opportunities to accomplish things in his administration, especially in the first 2 years, when he had the entire Congress with a supermajority in the Senate. The outcomes now, years and years later, and remember, I say these things as a guy who's generally Democrat. I think that the festering of problems that go all the way back to when Russia took Crimea and before, when we did not confront Iran over the 9/11, I think these things are all just coming to a head. So when President Trump says that he was left a mess, there's some truth to that. Now, when he says he's not stealing, that's a lie. But there is a lot of things that I think people have to process, put aside ideology, put aside emotion, put aside, I hate this guy because of that, or I really support this guy because of this or that. Just look at the policies and the history, independent of ideology and emotion. Follow the money. I think that's a big one with the Trump administration, whether it's domestic policy or foreign policy. And I think that you come to some inalienable conclusions. I think that's probably the wrong word. What is that from The Princess Bride? I don't think that's what that word means. I think that this was always coming. And I just think Trump is the one who decided to do it. So the people who had been agitating for this attack for 20 plus years finally found an ear that was willing to listen. I look at this as just as an investor, what are the outcomes, right? I am not running around on social media saying kill the Ayatollahs because, they don't usually take that well. And I don't want to be on one of their lists too. So I think it's important that we just say, okay, let's back up a second. It happened. Now what? And I think the now what is $25 billion from this point, and it probably goes higher, for damage to Middle Eastern energy infrastructure. What does that mean? Well, last week I had a limit order hit for N phase at 31. I had set that a while back. It was a small order. It was like 10,000 shares. And I think that the market could drop. JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley are saying that, we're probably going to get a rally. We'll see. I don't know. I think that the taco-driven economy is very difficult to predict. That is the nature of investing in general. The people who like the whole slow growth, I want to grind out my dividends, I'm just trying to make 7, 8, 9% a year. The problem is that most people do not factor in a margin of safety on the stocks that they buy. They don't really understand that the risks that they're taking. Talk about this in the chat after I say this. A year and a half ago, give or take, I started talking about the risk in private credit and business development corporations. Do you remember this? And I, over and over again, I said, sell the BDCs. And everybody's like, oh, well, is paying a 14% dividend. Yeah, well, now what's happened? Blue Owl and all kinds of these other companies are just getting crushed. The best companies are down 20%. And now the companies that are probably going to have to cut dividends and dilute, they're down 50, 60, 70%, and they're going lower. Now, how close are we to the bottom in private credit and business development corps? It depends on if there's an actual financial crisis. If there's a financial crisis, then they can all lose 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% more. If there's no financial crisis, we're probably getting close to the bottom. So we can start picking out who we think are going to be the big winners and losers from a consolidation and a rationalization within private credit and the business development corps. Somebody was arguing with me in the comments on Seeking Alpha, and I just started ignoring them after 2 or 3 comments because they just repeat themselves and they refuse to do any research and they don't really understand what the hell they're talking about. But he said, well, private credit and business development corps must be very healthy because JP Morgan and a couple of big institutional investors just raised money to buy private credit. Yeah. Do you know why they did that? Is that a sign of health that suddenly big firms are building capital pools to buy private credit. Do you think they're looking to buy private credit at the top? If that's what you think, then please don't manage your own money, because that's not what they're doing. They are looking to cherry pick the best assets after the prices come down in sympathy with everything else, and there's forced selling. Blue Owl already was put into a forced selling situation. They sold good assets. They bragged about getting 97 cents on a dollar or whatever they got. But the reality is that left them with worse assets. So they sold good assets to have money to pay for bad assets. Does that sound like a winning equation? So as the price of energy goes up, that ends up being another pressure on the liquidity in the capital markets. I think there are clearly some winners. As I said, Enphase, I got my first limit order hit. And remember, we bought Enphase way back at 30, sold a covered call on it when it was in the 40s, trimmed some of it in the 40s, and now we get a chance to buy it back around 30. Why am I high in Enphase? It's an oligopoly. There's only 3 companies, and maybe it'll end up being 5 or 6 that do all the connections and energy management for solar. And I was just in France, which is 75% nuclear energy, but a ton of the rest is solar. There is solar everywhere. I mean, every vineyard has solar. And it is the quick, easy, efficient way to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. As we know, extended range EVs, which I hope they just end up calling EVX because EREV is a dumb, hard thing to say. But if they start building these EVs that have the 2 or 3 gallon gas tank and a generator on board to take you from 100 or 200 miles on a charge to 600 or 7 or 500, whatever, 5, 6, 700 miles, if you decide you want to go on a longer trip, I think that these are in fact going to be the top selling American cars because we like bigger vehicles. We like crossovers and SUVs and trucks. I think that the EVX or EREV, as they're currently called, EVX is something I'm trying to brand. I did tell Jim Farley to call it an EVX. I said, if you use my idea, send me a car. So I'm hoping for a Ford EVX in the next 2 years. So the idea that suddenly oil and gas are the places to invest now, well, I was telling you to buy Permian Resources and Katera and Matador 1-2 years ago ahead of this. Why would you want to buy it now at the higher prices, right? You should be trimming into the strength, except for I think Matador and Permian Resources are holds. I think you can trim them if you want to reallocate the capital to a growthier investment. But Matador and Permian Resources are buying back a ton of shares. They're going to buy even more shares back. They're going to pay a special dividend because the insiders own a ton of stock and it's a way for them to get cash. So Matador and Permian Resources, the only 2 oil and gas stocks I want. Why? Because they are Permian pure plays. And that's what you want. You don't want a piece of North Dakota anymore. You don't want a piece of Oklahoma anymore. You don't want anything else out there. I mean, Gulf of Mexico, maybe a little bit. But you really, and I don't even know if that's true because I think in 3 years when the Democrats win everything, which clearly is what's lining up, I don't know that we develop the Gulf of Mexico all that much. I think that we push very, very hard on the EV theme. I think we push very hard on the solar theme. I think that several of the nuclear power plants that were decommissioned and are in the process of being recommissioned, I think that continues. I think it makes sense for us probably to build, I don't know how many, but 5 to 10 brand new nuclear power plants, big ones. And I think it makes sense to streamline the process. The technology is there for the big ones. The small nuclear reactors, those do not have the best technology. Remember, nuclear waste is like 10 times greater in a small modular reactor than for a big reactor. So I do think there could be a number of big reactors built. We'll see how much the Trump administration gets done and is underway. But the next administration can just jam the brakes. The projects that got built in Georgia and I think it was South Carolina before that. I can't remember exactly where. Those projects took 15 years to finish because there was repeated delays and from the legislative side, from the regulatory side, and from just not having the people or the parts. Solar is just the smartest thing, easiest thing to do. And it's cheap. Now that the batteries are getting cheaper and cheaper, even at nighttime, solar is a great deal because it doesn't cost much to store the energy anymore. So with the cost of solar all the way down to about the same as coal and natural gas, I think it's a little bit lower. It's lower during the day, but overnight with a battery, it ends up being about the same. It's a no-brainer that solar is about to explode. Does it take 3 years for the next administration? Maybe, but I think a lot of people are going to front run it. So we have to just buy the dips on solar and on batteries and on electrical grid infrastructure companies, which I have a couple of new ones for us. The whole development here is for those of you who've been around for 4, 5, 6 years, or even since 2018 and 19, everything that I've said is coming true. How do you play it as an investor? You have to get rid of this idea that okay investments are okay. You can't ever, not a single dollar should you ever allocate to an investment you think, oh, this is pretty good. Never, ever. If you are going to allocate money to something that could be around average, you're better off buying an ETF and getting better diversification and better risk management. You buy individual stock purely and exclusively because you think that either they're going to beat the market with a similar risk level or they're going to match the market with a much lower risk level. So let's take some examples. Somebody asked me about Microsoft. They said they bought it at 400. It's 370 now. Should they hold it or buy it or sell it? I was not telling anybody to buy Microsoft at 4 and 5, 600, whatever it got to. It is getting close to being a buy because they're a monster, right? They are one of the 3 biggest companies in cloud, and cloud controls everything now. The AI runs through it, edge computing, the whole IoT runs through the cloud. And more things are going to continue to run through the cloud because machine learning and AI are native to it. This idea that Amazon or Microsoft or Alphabet are played out, they control the cloud. So is there going to be an up-and-comer at some point that starts eating market share? Well, Oracle tried, and because they had to buy business, they paid a lot of money and drove up a huge debt and then leveraged themselves further as part of the Paramount deal. That money was, one-off over, but, it's really Alphabet and Microsoft and Amazon that you look at for the cloud. So when those 3 companies, specifically those 3 companies, take big corrections, you have to take a look at buying them. And on the fundamental side, those are the companies to buy. So fundamentally, we know those are companies to buy. Technically, we have to figure out when. So the first decision you always make is, what should I buy? And the second question is, Teresa, I'll allow you to answer. What's the question you answer after you decide what to buy? What's the next question? When? That's right, when to buy. So I want to buy Microsoft and Alphabet and Amazon. When do I do it? And that is a tough question. Most people don't look at technical analysis. Most advisors don't look at technical analysis. Something like 60 to 80% of advisors don't use technical analysis. And I've explained that to you before. Back in the day, when I was starting my career, first half of my career up until about 2010, when I was still affiliated with a broker dealer, right? Your Edward Joneses of the world, your Ameriprises of the world, whoever's out there. And they tell you, just buy the fund, just aggregate assets, just collect assets. They don't want money managers. They don't want people picking investments. They just want you to throw people, your customers, into a package because then they're collecting more fees. And they can say, well, if the market goes down, hey, that's everybody. I rejected that early in my career, very early. In 1999 is when I started to reject it. So after 3 years in the business, I realized that the business was crap. And I sold stocks in 1999. I bought 0 coupon bonds because some guy in Omaha was doing it. And I bought a fund, the Gabelli Capital Value Fund, Comstock Capital Value Fund, which was a short fund, was shorting the market. That I bought that in early 2000. I almost timed it perfectly. A little bit of accident there, but I was learning how to do technical analysis back then. All the charts were curving straight up. Didn't make any sense. They had PEs of a zillion. So I shorted the market in early 2000. Not much, about 10% of the portfolio, but I was sitting on a mountain of cash. I owned 0 coupon bonds, so when interest rates came down, I made money on those. And I bought a little company called Occidental Petroleum at the end of 1999. Take a look at that chart. You need to know when to buy. And when people get FOMO, the fear of missing out, I'm going to write an article that FOMO is for suckers. I don't know if Seeking Alpha will publish it under that title. You'll get it under that title. But FOMO is for suckers. There is a thing called trend following. And if you're good at it, and we do a light version of that with the ebb and flow trading of selling the options, trend trading works because it is based in technical analysis. So when you use sector funds or industry funds, things that have a focus that you can measure the data on, you can ride them up and down, right? You can ride them up, sell them, buy them when they come back down. Teresa does it all the time. That's why you should read everything that Teresa writes. She's one of the best technical analysts I've met. So when you're deciding when to buy, again, it's just like the politics. Get over your emotion. Get over your feelings. Be the stone cold killer bad guy in the movie. You have to be this way. If you can't be that way, again, don't manage your own money. If you can't be the shark, right? If it's not in your makeup, then hire me or somebody like me. You need to find people who are well-read, experienced. I guess there's a handful of people who didn't get the crap kicked out of them at some point. I have. And you learn from it. And you try not to make the same mistakes over. Now, a lot of mistakes you make twice. That's just like, oh, gee whiz, I saw it coming and I didn't adjust right. People who make the same mistakes 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 times and they rationalize it, oh, it's just the market or it's everybody or it's not me. That's bullshit, right? We're going to use a farmer's word today. Bullshit. If you're making the same mistakes over and over again, you haven't done the reading and you haven't done the learning, and there's something blocking you from doing it. It's usually emotions or ideology or rationalizing your place in the universe too much, right? I've been studying the middle way. I'll summarize it for you. Become as smart and as good as you can. It won't matter because you will still die alone suffering. There you go. That's Buddhism. And once you accept that, it's much easier to do the best you can because you're like, well, I'm doing it for me and for the people close to me, and maybe I can impact something a little bit beyond that. Life is what life is, right? I mean, people ask me if I'm still Catholic. I said, nah, I've kind of migrated to Jediism and Buddhism. And they're like, what's Jediism? I'm like, think about it. Help you, I will. All these things come into play when you are an investor because if you don't control your emotion, if you can't create a historically based, data-driven perspective of the world that very much respects the whole follow the money concept, because like everything's money, right? You have to get there. And this trip to Paris and down the Saône River and down the Rhone River, and I'll post going through one of the locks. It was pretty cool. It helps me meditate. I mean, I really just meditated for 3 weeks. I sat on the deck. I watched us go in a lock and then go down, and drank my bottles of wine. I will tell you, in France, you can drink a bottle of wine every day pretty easily, and you just think and you gain perspective and you just listen to the people around you. What are they talking about? What are they doing with their time? There was a group, and what's funny was I have a picture of it somewhere. There was a guy on my boat. We were sitting at dinner one night, and I looked at Jolene and I said, "Don't turn around, but the guy behind you looks just like Jerome Powell." I can't hear him, so I don't know if it's him. It looks so much like Jerome Powell, I had to hear his voice to know if it was him. And Jolene looks at me and she goes, "I hate you right now." And I go, "Why?" "Because you got goddamn Bloomberg on all the time, and I know who Jerome Powell is, and I don't want to." So anyway, I ended up talking to the guy. He was Southern. He was from Georgia. He was not Jerome Powell, but he looked, 99% doppelganger, a little bit older. And, so I listened to his group talk, and all they talked about was red politics. And they were rationalizing the whole universe. They were talking about God and religion and Christian United States and everything else. And, I didn't engage. I just listened and tried to figure out why they believe the things they believe. And they talked about money and investing at some point, and I'm listening, and they're going to get waxed. I know they're going to get waxed. The things that they're investing in for the reasons they're investing, just shit reasons. Just not even a farmer's word, just pure shit. You have to wrap your head around what to invest in, which is driven by the big secular trends, and then when to invest. So to that end, What was the one thing that I did over the last few weeks? I wrote the outline to my investment book. It looks like it's going to be a 250 to 300 page book. The outline is completely done. Most of the chapters are half filled in. There's about 50 graphics for the book, and I don't know if it will end up a little bit higher or lower. But it talks about the 4-step process that we have, right? Invest in the secular trends, analyze the fundamentals, analyze the policies of the Federal Reserve and the government, and then take a look at the technical analysis, which for me isn't just drawing pretty lines on a chart. It's trying to identify the quantitative data underneath the chart. So I'm more quantitatively driven. I don't sit there and draw lines. As I've told you with TradingView, I buy LuxAlgo and I use all the algorithms because this idea that you're going to draw lines that are right is bullshit. What you should be using is the algorithmic AI driven quantitatively derived ways of looking at a chart. You say, okay, well, this analysis says this analysis agrees, this analysis half agrees, this analysis disagrees. Which one's right? And then you have to take your fundamental outlook and your view of things within the secular world, which is growth in alternative energy, growth in technology, number one. And where is that leading? What is coming? Stanley Druckenmiller said, if you can look at the world 5, 6, 7 years out versus 1 or 2 or 3 years out, you will make a lot more money. So that is what I'm encouraging you to do. Look at what the world's going to be 5, 6, 7 years from now versus what you think it's going to be in the next year or two. Because the next year or two is pretty much entirely priced in, at least to the upside, in almost all situations. The only time that the downside is priced in is when there's panic. And that's usually the time to hold your breath, wait for the last people to scream, and then pick things up off the ground and buy them. I don't know how low we're going to go, but it is clear to me that we have a slow moving financial crisis going on right now. Credit markets are starting to tighten up, with energy being tighter for the next few years. That's going to be a drag on liquidity. It is a big thing what is going on with the energy. It is clear to me that the secular trend of clean energy is about to take off. And there's been some front running already, which is why we're not at the bottoms right now. Will we get all the way back to the bottoms? I doubt it. I really don't think so. I think that the bottom on clean energy probably was about a year and a half ago. And, if we get that 30, 40, 50, 60% retrace, right, from the bottom to where we are now, right? I guess I have to do it this way. I'm not really sure what it looks like to you. But, you had that rally off the bottom. It won't go all the way back down, probably, unless there's a financial crisis. Probably has a retrace of part of the gain, and then it resumes, right? So one wave up, wave down, then another wave up. So we have 2 waves up yet coming in clean energy investing. So you really do want to buy the dips. That's why I bought some Enphase. I was unhappy with the fact that I hadn't bought more the first time it was around 30. So I'm adding more around 30. Now, if you take a look at the charts, absolutely it can go into the lower to middle 20s. Again, I think there's a lot of people with big checkbooks like me who, much bigger checkbooks than me. I mean, I'm just a big checkbook for middle class people. But, I think there's a lot of 9, 10-figure accounts out there that are looking at companies like Enphase and Solar Edge and probably Generac and saying, okay, what's the future of energy? And it is more electrification, tons more electrification, smarter grids, better energy management. And these things aren't going to take 3 years to build. They're going to take 10, 15, 20 years to build. These are incredibly long runways. If you talk to anybody who's in electrical grid building, right, where they're building out the grid, there is a shortage of everything. Transformers, everything. There's a shortage of everything. Metals, everything. The backlog right now are 3, 4, 5 years. The backlogs as we transition more away from fossil fuels are going to continue to be 3, 4, 5 years and maybe 6, 7, 8 years. These backlogs, these long-term projects to upgrade the grid, to make it more renewable, to make it easier to manage, to move energy from here to there, to here to there. That is just one of the biggest markets I've ever seen in my life. Technology is the only thing that outweighs it. And technology is driving the change in energy. So between technology, right, AI, machine learning, industrialization using machine learning and AI, commercial businesses um, increasing their margins because their people become 5 times more efficient and they can drive higher revenues and wider margins without hiring people, right? The margins get wider because they won't have to hire new people as they grow. There's a lot of good opportunities. On the flip side, what's coming is probably a lot fewer low skilled jobs, right? You're going to have medium level skills to be able to do a job where AI is your partner, or you're going to have to be highly skilled or do something semi physical that other people can't do. That's why the skilled trades, right? If you're a 17-year-old guy and you're not sure that you want to become a doctor or an engineer, go into the skilled trades, right? Now, we still need people in the humanities because it keeps us human, but you better be good at it. And I think that life experience is good for people who go into those fields. So learn how to do something else too, in my opinion. Work, work while you're learning. Understand that, hey, I had to sling pizzas, while I was getting an education, and I learned some work ethic. And I learned to appreciate the people who sling the pizzas. I go to a pizza place now. The first thing I did when I got back is I got a pizza. I went back and I said, hey, I was just in France for 3 weeks. I needed one of your pizzas. And it was like a $32 pizza. It was a big pizza, but $32. That same pizza was what, 14, 15 bucks 10 years ago. I pay him $32. I said, look, I used to make pizza. I never made it this good. And so we should appreciate all the people who are working. And that's one of the things I took away in France. Even though they only work about 9 months a year in aggregate, because they have tons of time off, they have 2 weeks off every quarter and then basically half of the summer off. They all worked. They were super professional. Now, one of the things on this trip to Paris and to the south of France, down the rivers, that I was watching for was, where was this French attitude, right? Were people going to give me shit? Were they going to not treat me well? I will tell you that way over 80% of the people, probably 90% of the people, not only were professional and helpful, they were outright nice, right? So if you started with bonjour, they were like, all right, you gave it a try. Let's talk. Do you need me to speak English? Please. So I think Americans from the center of the country, which is where I'm from, right? We have this chip on our shoulder about the East and West Coast. And now that I've been to the East and West Coast a ton of times, I can tell you that chip on our shoulder probably shouldn't be there, other than the fact that the Washington, New York corridor steals from us, right? So, but they steal from everybody. They're not just stealing from the middle of the country, they're stealing from everybody, So maybe one of these days we'll fix that. Probably not in my lifetime, but maybe the millennials do a fourth turning move on them, and we start having a less corrupt government. And my opinion, I think the Republicans are more corrupt than the Democrats. Really, I think the Democrats are more ineffectual than anything. But the Republicans, since the 80s, they've been pretty corrupt. And really, I guess since the 70s. The whole Watergate was a thing. So you start taking a look at all these things stacking up. Again, and coming back to the investing side, you say, well, everybody in France was hardworking and professional, and they were nice. And then you see an article that BlackRock is going to put $500 million, or was it $5 billion, whatever, it was a big number, into European private equity. Then you see Blackstone is doing it, KKR is doing it, Apollo is doing it, Carlyle is doing it. And you start seeing all this private equity money starting to go to Europe. Why? Why are they doing it? You may have an idea why all this private equity money is starting to flow to Europe. There's a pretty easy answer. No, not liquidity. There's an impact on liquidity everywhere. But why is the smart money, right? Because I've told you, private equity, not private credit. Private equity. Why is private equity the smartest money in the room, usually, investing in Europe? What has happened in the United States the last 30 to 40 years? It's not valuation. It's not safety and security. What has happened in the United States the last 30 or 40 years? Since the 90s. What's happened here? What has done well? What has kicked the shit out of every sector of the economy? Technology. Europe has a lot of catching up on technology. Do you think there's not going to be a European Google or Amazon or Microsoft in the future? If that's what you think, you're out of your mind. We have alienated them so much in the last 8 years that they're pivoting away from us. All these people who say, well, they can't afford to be without us. Bullshit. Not only are they more well-read than us, their kids are not playing on their phone every goddamn day. As I walked around that country, you know what I saw? People sitting on benches in parks reading books, like the United States in the 60s and 70s. By the way, just as an aside, go on YouTube and find one of those videos that are sped up a little bit and how they go around roundabouts and drive in the city. Yeah, that shit's real. That's not AI. They drive like that. So I'll throw this one out there. Almost everybody in France was a better driver than people in America. They're driving on thinner roads with cars that are closer together. And in Paris, with 50 million tourists a year, it's unbelievably busy. And I wasn't even there at the busiest period. I was there. I was there at the very start, right? As it was the switch from the end of the down season to the start of the up season. Yeah, you want to learn how to drive? go buy a car for cheap in Paris and then drive it around, and you will learn how to drive. Now, I'm not saying it's the best way to drive. I'm just saying that all the times you think they're getting into an accident and they don't, it's pretty amazing to me. I thought for sure we were going to be in accidents. Anyway, private equity is starting to pour money into Europe. They've been doing it about a year now, maybe a year and a half. And it's because they're going to try to repeat, right? They're going to try to make all the money in Europe that they have already made once in Asia and once in the United States. They're looking for another market. And maybe in 10 or 20 years, it'll be Africa's turn. There's a lot of money getting poured into Europe. And I think the questions you should be asking are, to what extent does the European bureaucracy hurt things, but also to what extent do they help things? And if there is a consensus, and you should be paying attention to Macron in France because he's been brilliant lately, and the right wings in Europe have taken some hits, right? Orban just got voted out. I think that Europe is going to do very well. And one of the reasons I went to Europe was because I was already thinking this and I wanted to see. I've been talking about international investing again for a year or two. What's coming in Europe? And I don't know exactly how to find them yet. And I'm looking. I don't know exactly who's going to win. I don't know where exactly the money's going to go. I don't know exactly the people involved. But I will tell you, there is going to be a European Amazon, and there is going to be a European Google, and there's going to be a European Microsoft. It's just a matter of how long does it take and what do the speed bumps look like. But they are not going to be as dependent on us, just like we pivoted away from China under Trump and even under Biden. They're going to pivot away from us. Not that they'll be without us, but they will be less dependent on us, and they will have homegrown options, right? They'll have homegrown choices. Oh, that said, there's some big Amazon stuff out there. I saw it, I saw big Amazon facilities in the countryside. Did not see a lot of their trucks, so they must be using some separate delivery mechanism. I didn't see Amazon trucks. Maybe they were there and they're just not labeled the way ours are labeled. I did not see a Microsoft data center, but they have to be there. Did not see an Alphabet data. I didn't really pay attention enough to know if I was looking at data centers, but I didn't see the labeling. The fact that they're not labeling things that are easy to see in most cases, I think that speaks pretty loudly. I did see Amazon.fr on something on some big building, so I don't know if that was a logistics facility or a data facility. I couldn't tell, but I think that there's a lot of money that's going to get piled into Europe, France in particular, because France has cheap energy, right? France has very cheap energy. If energy is a big deal and they have a ton of nuclear and they're building out solar and they're becoming much less dependent on gasoline or petrol and natural gas, I think France is probably a place. And again, one of the reasons I spent the extra time there, right? I was supposed to do this little river cruise, but I decided to do 9 days in Paris and talk to people. I think France is in good position. So I think that is definitely one of the countries we should look at. The cheap energy is a big deal. I'm not sure what's going on in the UK with energy, so we have to really figure that out. I don't know what their nuclear energy is. I just don't know. So we'll have to take a look into that. But energy is very cheap in France, right? It's 75-80% nuclear. I do have some pictures of one of the nuclear power plants that we went by, so you get a chance to take a look at that. I'll put that into an article. But if you are French and watching, or if you're familiar with France and the French economy, you should be looking, because there are companies there that I don't know about yet that I'm pretty sure the environment is setting up so that they do very, very well, right? Because they're getting American capital with the Europeans trying to develop some of their own things. And you already know they're pushing back on American big tech. That's been going on for years. So we'll see how it all plays out. But that is, that is kind of the gist of what I've been thinking about for the last few weeks. Again, don't try to get too cute with Enphase. I think Enphase is one of the safest picks out there, right? A lot of money on the balance sheet, no real debt. They're in an oligopoly. It's double bottoming right now. Does it go a few bucks lower? Yeah, maybe. But I would be scaling into Enphase. I intend for Enphase to be a double position, and I think that is inevitable. A Metis, which is back above a double position because the price went up a little bit. I think that when they announce the IPO, it's going to surprise a lot of people how well they do. India is really hurting because of the Iran situation. They're probably going to do big contracts, which are due any day. Big contracts for the biodiesel, and it wouldn't surprise me to see the OMCs in India, the three companies that control the Indian fuel market. It wouldn't surprise me to see them invest in universal biofuels, which is what's getting spun off of from Ametis. The paperwork is already being done. They're putting together their syndicate to do the offering. And we'll see when it comes. Is it next month? Is it the month after? I don't know. But the setup, now that Iran has been attacked and $25 billion of damage to the energy infrastructure has happened, I mean, Ametis couldn't be in a better position. So unless there's a reason why India doesn't want to deal with them, I think Ametis is about to drop a big check to the bottom line. And when that happens, if Universal Biofuels gets valued closer to $1 billion than $500 million, remember I said that's the range, $500 million to $1 billion for Universal Biofuels. If it gets valued closer to $1 billion than $500 million, I mean, you're getting a lot of money. I mean, that's enough to basically pay off all of Ametis' debt, expand Universal Biofuels, and probably, build the new plant at Riverbank. Yeah. For those of you trading Ametis, bad idea. Just a bad idea because you don't know the day that headline is going to hit, and it's soon. So stop screwing around and get whatever long-term position you want in Ametis, get it. I mean, it could be tomorrow. Who knows? I mean, this little dip from the traders being traders, that is something that you should take advantage of. It's probably not going to double bottom. Somebody asked, does anyone have any insight why AMTX took such a move today? Was relatively heavy volume, not concerned, just interested if anybody has any takes. So, you know me, I'll pick on you when you ask a dumb question because there are dumb questions, and that's one of them. I'm sorry. Look, looking for a hot take? Look, this isn't Stephen A. Smith in the NBA. Get over that shit. It irritates me, as you can see, that people keep asking these short-termism, oh, why did that happen questions. Traders being traders. That is the answer almost always. Short-term moves are always traders. Now, things that end up becoming a waterfall or the ebb and flow up, that's accumulation by institutions or selling by institution. But this stuff, that's just the 20 or 30% of people who decide they think that they can outsmart the market, running back and forth. What happens when people rock a boat back and forth enough times? They flip the damn thing over and they all get thrown overboard and a couple survive. That's what happens all the time in the market. In this case, what's going to happen is that the people who sold, because, I made a good trade, I made 50% on my trade, they're going to miss 10,000%. Stop thinking like a trader unless you know that you're a top 10% trader. If you don't know that you're a top 10% trader, then you're not. So don't trade. There was an article that came out recently, I think Saturday, but somebody did a study, and basically people who retired and then started trading more became worse off because suddenly I got the time to be a trader. So if you weren't a good trader at 30 and 40, the idea that you're suddenly going to become a good trader at 65 or 70 is wrong. Work on your golf game. Go and try to catch that big muskie, right? Go hike the national parks, something else. If you weren't a good trader when you were younger, you are not going to be a good trader when you're older. 9 out of 10 of you. There's that 1 out of 10. But if you're not, look at the world, understand the secular trends, do the best you can to identify the fundamentals and understand them, follow the money, and then apply technical analysis or at least try to understand what Teresa and I are doing. what to invest in and when to invest in it. And stop asking questions like, oh, why did that move today? Right? Motley Fool writes an article why things move today. Do you know why they do it? Because of all the people who will subscribe to such a bullshit notion. Understand what's going to happen down the road, not what happened yesterday. Because what happened yesterday, usually traders being traders. Again, if there's a waterfall down or ebb and flow, waves up, that's institutions, that's big money, that matters. But the people running back and forth, hey, look, I gambled better than you today. Bust outs. They're all bust outs. I have people argue with me all the time. But hey, I just put $2,000 into the stock and now it's 2,200. One day I made $200 in a day. Yeah, I understand. I remember. I made 10x on my money twice in exact sciences because I understood the catalysts that were going to drive it up, and I understood the buy an anomaly when it dropped, and I wrote it back up again. That's how you have to invest. Know your investments so well that when something out of the ordinary happens, you can assess it and say, okay, did it matter? Or is it just one of those weird buying opportunities that because the market got schizophrenic for a moment, well, it's always schizophrenic, I have a chance to invest cheap. Think about those things. And I'll say this one more time. For those of you who've been around, when I repeat myself, I'm thinking pretty hard. France in particular probably has some very good investment opportunities coming. And I think that we probably are going to be able to find maybe some small companies, but small and mid-sized companies that are going to get backed by private equity with policy on their side that gives them very good 5, 10, 15-year growth. Europe in general needs entrepreneurship. That is the last thing that they don't have. And it's been a problem for a long time. If the Europeans adopt some of the US entrepreneurial drive, you're going to see a massive rally in some of those stocks. Maybe not the whole market, but there are going to be certain companies that do what Nvidia did, that did what Microsoft and Alphabet and Amazon did. They're coming. Our job is to figure out who they are. Maybe Nebius I missed the boat on, but maybe it is one to buy the dips on. I don't know. I just don't like the management. So who is going to be the next company in cloud, right? I talked about Alphabet and Microsoft and Amazon being the cloud oligopoly. Who is going to be part of a European cloud oligopoly? Which companies are going to be part of the energy management of the electrification of everything? I think Enphase is one of them. Think about those things because the difference between what you can make, if you take a look over the last year, the United States investing wasn't great, but a lot of the international markets did really well. I think that there is a lot of opportunity around the world. Asia, just because it's growing, India in particular. I think Malaysia has some opportunity. I think Indonesia, Vietnam, young economies, they have some resources, they have tech. India is ahead of everybody. And as they pull people into the middle class, they're going to do really well. And in Europe, they don't want to be our vassal state. So they are going to build some of the things that we have that they've just been using. Any interesting questions for me? Yeah, I'll take a look at that company, Maxim. Somebody mentions the public transportation. Yeah, I think that there's going to be more of that in the United States. Uh, France is as big as Texas. I think that's right. So the train system there, and I rode the train from Nîmes to Paris on my second to last day. 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours. I can't remember how long the trip was, but we, a week-long boat ride down to the south of France, back to Paris was 3 hours by train, and their trains are awesome. My son pointed out that strikes are kind of like, and protests are kind of like a national sport there. So from time to time, stuff shuts, and sometimes it's only for an hour, right? It's, hey, just remember that we're striking today. We're going to take an hour off. We did have to deal with that one day. So I had to take a Uber out to Versailles instead of taking the train because the train was closed from 9 to 2. 9 to 2. Freaking 9 to 2, exactly when I need it. So we took an Uber. The Ubers, by the way, what two big vehicles are they driving for Uber out there? Mercedes, vans, because we had 5 people a lot of times, so we'd taken vans. If you order an Uber XL, you might get a Prius with a third row. That sucked. That happened to us once. I was like, okay, stop asking for XL. There was 5 people, just ask for a van. But then Greeley had Chinese EVs there. I think they're built through a UK company, but it's basically a shell company for assembling Chinese EVs that they send to France. Probably sell everywhere in Europe. But the Chinese EVs are there. And I've talked to people who are clients and subscribers, and lots of other countries, Central America, South America, Chinese EVs are penetrating. You just had the CEO of Honda, Toyota, and Nissan. I think all three CEOs said that they don't know how they're going to compete with the Chinese EVs. I mean, they came right out and said it. They were like, this is an existential threat. That is one thing that the United States should keep in mind. With so much of our employment directly or indirectly tied to transportation, we need to have our own transportation industry. We have to get better at the EVs. We have to get better at the EREVs, which I do think are going to be big sellers here. And we're going to have to protect our markets. It's just the way it is. But the Chinese are so far ahead of us right now that the rest of the world, that's like, well, we just need the cars. We can't take the time to build up this industry. There's going to be a lot of Chinese EVs all over the world, and it's just going to keep growing. These cars are amazing. So the van that we took, it was comfortable. It was big on the inside. It was smaller on the outside than the Mercedes diesel, I think it was. Yeah, they're good cars. Timing release of my book, second half of the year. When I was in France, young people didn't appear they had the work ethic to pull off some of the things in your session. Well, I do think the entrepreneurial drive, which has been declining in the United States for 10, 20 years, I think that's cyclical. I think a lot of things with humanity are cyclical, generation over generation. If you haven't read The Fourth Turning, you should read The Fourth Turning by Strauss. And I forget the other guy's name. But The Fourth Turning is a book you should read. And I think that it's going on. I don't think it's happening exactly the way that they predicted. I think the millennials, I think that it is important to consider just the change in attitude. So I sat outside the University of Paris over by the Sorbonne 2 hours one day. Jolene got a little tired. I think it was our second day out there. She was a little tired, under the weather. So she went back, took a nap. My son Joshua and I went for a walk to the Pantheon. Then we walked over to the university. We found a little cafe, sat down, did happy hour, had some snacks. I forget what they called their small plates. But we just happened to sit outside. It was a big wall and a big building, but there was a hole in the wall with a door. And students just kept streaming in and out. I don't think that there is a shortage of motivation. And actually, I think that Trump is very motivational to the Europeans. Right now, they're seeing that they have to put their foot on the pedal. And I think that's going to happen. I think the combination of government policy, I think young people wanting to make something of their lives, I think the private equity capital and the institutional capital that's going to start flowing in and has been flowing in is going to change things. So, we'll see how fast it moves. We'll see how universal it becomes. But I think that from the low price that you're buying, that the upside is pretty substantial. Somebody mentions the cycling in Paris. I forget if it was Dijon or Lyon or maybe both. I think it's Dijon, which awesome little city. I'd like to go back there. I did not get a chance to go to a mustard place. I'm very sad about that. I did go to a truffle farm though. That was cool. Got to watch the dogs pick up truffles. Saw the Tour de France stuff that they're getting ready for. So there's a lot of people on those roads in the hillsides, riding up and down these hills on the bikes. I mean, they take bicycling seriously. Holy cow! So it was pretty neat. It was pretty neat. All right. Anything else? So Wednesday night I will be doing the macro program. I just wanted to kind of give you the rundown of my big picture thinking here. But I'll be doing the macro on Wednesday night with the ETFs. We'll put up a bunch of charts. I will talk about the financial crisis that I see developing. The question is does it get 2009 bad or is it just 2022? I don't know. I don't think we're going to know. But the damage to the energy infrastructure in the Middle East is a big deal. I actually think that we should take a look at the companies that will make some money on rebuilding that stuff. Maybe it's Halliburton, maybe it's Schlumberger. I'm not really sure. But, we can take a look and see if there's a well-priced opportunity. Now, I don't like those things from a secular standpoint. However, there might be a cyclical trade in there. But I don't know that any of it's cheap anymore, right? I think you had to buy a year ago. So we'll see. All right, have a good rest of the day. I'll see you Wednesday. And I will say to anybody who's younger, I made a mistake not going to Europe in my 20s. If you can go to Europe and other places, if you can travel young, especially high school, college age, find a way to do it. If you can take an international internship or go take classes somewhere for a semester, somewhere else in the world, do it. Your perspective of the world changes when you travel. I've been to 45 states. I've been to Canada. I've been to Mexico. I've been to the Caribbean. I've been to South America. Hadn't been over the ocean, I mean, kind of, but not like across an ocean. And things that I suspected were true. Like I never really bought into the French people are stuck up and mean. It's completely validated. Almost everybody was nice. They're nicer than they are in Chicago, right? Not to pick on Chicago, but the folks in Paris were nicer than any of the big cities I've been in. Any of them. So San Francisco maybe is close. And you gotta remember the nice parts of San Francisco, everybody's nice. If you're younger, travel. Just travel because your perspective of the world will evolve and you will understand that some of the stuff that you hear from people who have never been anywhere is actually bullshit. And once your bullshit detector is well honed, you make fewer mistakes and you have a better long-term outlook. And you'll be more optimistic because going all the way, now that I've seen all these buildings that were built in the Dark Ages and during the Plague and during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, right? I mean, there's buildings, I saw buildings that were built in 945, right? And 1100 and 1200 and 1500 and King Louis the 14th, 15th, and 16th, in the 16, 17, 1800s. You get that perspective of an older world. And remember, in America, 250-year anniversary this year. We're babies. We're just babies. We are the new money on the block, and we act like it a lot, and we need to start growing up. And hopefully, this millennial fourth turning that's happening, hopefully they aren't so damaged from all the bullshit in the last 20 some years. They turn us the right way because they're the big voting bloc. And I'm trying that my book is going to be partially about this. I'm trying to get people to look at things with a little bit more perspective. I have a section in there about economic theory with Keynes and Austrian economics. You know that I rip on the Austrian economists all the time because I think it's a captured religion. I rip on the Christian nationalists all the time. I'm going to sneak that into the book. I think that you need to have perspective that is historical, that is appreciative, that is data-driven too, and with a very heavy dose of psychology because people are people, and the way that we rationalize and the way that we validate ourselves plays into everything. And you've heard me discuss this before. People get stuck. They just get stuck, and they don't progress. They get to an age in their 20s or 30s, and they stop growing. I have made a conscious effort since I was young to always try to grow, always try to build upon what I've already done, try to find where I'm making a mistake and fix it, try to expand my range of outlook, try to knock this small city industrial kid chip off my shoulder, which is hard, probably never goes away. Try to embrace the goodness because the world, since the Dark Ages and the Plague, generation over generation, for hundreds and hundreds of years, and really thousands of years, except for those little blips, has been getting better generation after generation after generation. That's true. Every statistical analysis, every data point, the world just keeps getting better no matter how many times that we fuck it up. I almost got through the whole call. Zuck it up. And it's going to keep getting better. And sometimes these periods of time when everybody gets upset, when everybody gets remotivated, unmotivated, cross-motivated, whatever, we usually come out of it better. And we'll come out of this one better too. Might take a few years, might take one in the junk first, but we'll come out better. And the two things that are going to make the world better are technology and renewable energy. And I guess I should add all the things that technology impacts, like biotech and healthcare, transportation, right? So technology and all the derivatives, including renewable energy. Imagine what the world is like if energy is cheap for everybody. That makes food cheaper. That makes transportation cheaper. That makes everything better and more abundant. But we're going through the expensive phase right now because we just blew a bunch of stuff up. All right. Somebody goes close. 2 Zucks and an F-bomb. I wore this shirt, the Milwaukee shirt, twice, once in Paris, once on the cruise. I had my Merce t-shirt that I just wore underneath my sweater. So it was cold the first 12 days of the trip. So until we got towards the south of France, until we got to Avignon, it was cold. I mean, it was in the 40s and 50s almost every day. We got to Avignon, it was in the 60s, and then in or maybe it was Lyon, whichever one comes first. Lyon was in the 60s, and then Avignon and Arles and Nîmes were all in the 70s. I think the last day it was probably 80. Oh, by the way, Jolene found it. We were at the Nîmes Gardens. I forget exactly what it's called. I'll show you some pictures. It was pretty cool. I know you want to see all my pictures. And I was like, we got to go eat lunch. So she checked. She found a place called Le Garage. So we walked 3 or 4 blocks to Le Garage. It was a Harley Davidson biker restaurant. We walked up. There's people with Harley Davidsons, and I was like, all right. So we walk in, and the proprietor only spoke French. Said bonjour, and he goes, lunch, English. We goes, come on. Sat us down, and we go, Harley Davidson motorcycles. He goes, Harley Davidson, yeah. And he said whatever their word for motorcycles was. We go, yeah, we're from Milwaukee. Oh, Milwaukee, Harley Davidson. And he called over a guy that knew English. He lived in Tampa for 20 years, but he's French. Started talking to us about the bar. Anyway, had couscous, awesome, and a burger. So she had a burger, I had the couscous, and we shared. Amazing food. So I don't know where that comes from. Where couscous is from. Is that Indian? I don't know what couscous is. But it was very, very good. Moroccan, yeah, it was. So these people might have been Moroccan. Yeah, that probably makes sense. It kind of had a Middle Eastern look. They were awesome. There's just everybody there was, again, another place where everybody's nice. The bikers are all nice. Unless you go to a gang bar in America, most bikers are just middle class dudes who can afford a bike, and it's how they get their yayas out. So it was a good trip. I'll tell you what, it was a great trip. I cannot recommend France more highly. Saw a bunch of the museums. That was cool. Uh, Orsay is just amazing. And you can do Orsay in a day. The Louvre we did for a day, and it was like we could have been there for 3 or 4 more days. Mainly did the antiquities, not the art. Went into the room with the Mona Lisa, and they need to set up a line, a better way of doing the Mona Lisa, because you just had a mass of humanity pushing up there and getting shuffled out. They really ought to put in some ropes or something. But I gave up. I got my picture of the Mona Lisa from 5x away, and I just said, okay, well, you're never gonna get to just stand in front of it and look at it. So you have to probably have to pay for a private showing. So we went to Versailles. That was cool, but it was another mass of humanity. We did take a private tour of the king's quarters. That was worth the money. Group of 20 people in parts of the museum that are closed. The artwork is just off the hook. I mean, if you're into art, you have to go to Paris. You just have to. In Arles, we took a tour, Vincent van Gogh tour, because he had spent some time there. The yellow house wasn't yellow, it was white. He just liked yellow. He liked yellow and blue, and a lot of stuff that he painted in yellow and blue was actually white or gray. So, it was a lot of neat stuff. So, if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't been there, you should go. We did an Amaway cruise down the Saône and Rhone rivers. Just one of the best things I've ever done. Now, would I do it again? No, because in another country I would, but I would never do the one in France again. Why? Because now I know the places I want to go and spend more time in. So it was like a sampling platter. You spend a half day in this city, a day in this city, a half day in this city. I would want to have more time in Dijon. I would like to have more time in Lyon. Lyon is just unbelievable. Avignon was pretty cool. I really liked Arles. Nîmes, which we did on the last day, I paid for a driver to take us there. We went to Port de Gare with the aqueduct. The aqueduct was mind blowing. So those of you who've been to Rome or Greece and seen aqueducts, I had never seen one up close. The thing was huge. I can't believe they built this 2,000 years ago. It is pretty cool. Yeah, somebody says Lyon is incredible. Yeah, Lyon. I would like to maybe go spend like 4 or 5 days in Lyon and just eat and shop my way through it, honestly, and go. I saw so many cathedrals and basilicas that and we have 2 basilicas in greater Milwaukee. I don't know if people know that. And ours are big, but you could fit 10 of them inside of some of these other things. I mean, Notre Dame. It's going to look funny when I show you. I'm going to show you the video. When we did our tour of Notre Dame, it was Good Friday, I think. I think it was Good Friday. It might have been. It was Easter weekend. I think it was Good Friday. And I just happened to be standing next to the altar, coming around on the tour around the outside, and they had a mass going. And I know the music because I used to be Catholic, or I'm a Catholic emeritus. And I heard the music. I was like, oh my gosh, they're coming down. They're coming down the center aisle right now. So I just happened to be a little bit behind the altar and off to the left. I mean, it looks like I'm sitting in the front row when I do the video. And the priest, actually, it was a bishop, comes down. He's got the broccoli and he's sprinkling holy water on people. I don't know what that stuff is. It's not broccoli, but whatever it is. And it was Ash Wednesday. That's what it was. It was Ash Wednesday or Palm Sunday. I don't know. It was some holy day. And yeah, it looks like I'm part of the it looks like I'm an altar boy. So, which I'm not. But yeah, so super cool. So, I'm gonna have to cut this video off and edit it, but yeah, I'm still a little bit in awe. I'm a little bit in awe. My son, while we were on the cruise, went up to the UK and went to London for 3 days. This is the son who said, "Why would I go to London?" So he ends up going to London for 3 days by himself. He saw the Lion King and the Book of Mormon, and took a bus around town and saw the whole city. So I do think London and UK is a trip that I'll be doing soon. Definitely going to do Italy probably next year. We'll see. I am pretty sure I'll be doing 2 to 3 weeks in Europe every year for the rest of my life now. There's just so much. There's so much. Jolene wants to go back to Spain. I think I want to go to Greece at least on a cruise and get a day or two there. So we'll see. We'll see. If you guys have any recommendations for ways to do Europe, I think I got this trip about 80% right. I know what I need to change at this point. Amsterdam, I'd like to do. I'd like to do the Danube River, wine and food tour. There's just so much. So, all right, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for your time. And yes, I do think young people should go to Europe. But yeah, I'm in my 50s now, and yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, Michael. I appreciate it, and I think that I don't know, maybe it's just you evolve to it, right? You go when you're young, and it's just like, oh, open your eyes a little bit. You think you're smart, and then 20 or 30 years later, you realize I wasn't that smart, but it helped me. And I think that is probably good for people, probably good for the world. All right, everybody, take care. Have a good day, and we will talk ETFs and the macro environment on Wednesday night.